Okay, guys, just doing a quick test here. Quick test. Test, test, test. You can see that Pluto is about to rise here in San Francisco. And I thought I'd do a quick tarot spread for this moment and see how the cards relate to what's in the sky currently. Testing, test, test. So I do a 5-card spread. It's a question and answer spread or a guidance spread. You can think of it in different ways. Draw 5 cards. The first card represents the question. In this case, something about maturity, maturation, guidance, about maturity. And this is supposed to be for me and for the world, for whoever's listening. That's the intention, that these cards be of benefit to whoever happens to view this video. Let's see, let's actually this edge down here. That's better. Do that like that. That's better. So this is a 5-card guidance spread. The first card is supposed to clarify and deepen what the question is about, what you're seeking guidance about. And so when I see this card, I think for myself that I'm asking a question about the maturation process for myself. And then the cards will reveal guidance with regard to that. And so the second card is meant to represent the background leading up to this moment where I'm asking this question, or where you're asking the question, or where you're seeking guidance, the relevant background to this moment where you're seeking guidance. So the first card is maturity. And the second card, the background, I pulled 2 cards in this case. Sometimes that happens, but these both I would put in the second position. In this Osho deck, this is the Osho Zen Tarot deck, the 2 cards that represent the background to this moment I'm asking a question about maturation are healing, that have been in a process of healing, which is true. I definitely feel like the background to this moment has been a big healing process for me. Probably the last 10 years have been a big healing process, but certainly the last couple of years, and especially this year, has felt like a really big healing year for me. And so if you're watching this video and you're reflecting on this for yourself, you would be tuning into your own maturation process and reflecting on how you've been healing in the relevant background to this moment. And that you have also been in a process of trust, letting go, and trusting the process, trusting yourself, trusting your intuition. You can see it's a person who's falling through the sky, apparently not concerned that they're falling through the sky. They're in an attitude of trust. And this spread, the 5-card spread, the guidance spread, each card builds on itself. Each card builds on the previous card or cards, and you get a kind of reinforced message, a reinforced guidance. And it's interesting now, turning to the astrology here, picking up these cards. Maturity has a lot to do with Saturn. And so in this case, looking at what's going on with Saturn, and we're at the tail end of a Saturn-Neptune square. It's been dominating the last 2.5 years, certainly all of 15 and all of 16, and this is the third year. It's not as precise geometrically, but in the last 2 or 3 months, it's gotten back as close as it will again, and then it's going to start moving away from precision. And so this is the integration phase of a 2-year visitation from the Saturn-Neptune, we can call it the learning process, the Saturn-Neptune transformation portal, however you want to think about it. And there's so many things we could point out that are happening in the world right now that are relevant to the Saturn square Neptune, from these devastating floods and hurricanes. Neptune has to do with water and flooding and toxic waters, the incredible toxicity of what's happened in Texas and Louisiana, the sense of a kind of toxic womb, pollution. Also, in a different way, it's consistent with all the fires that are raging here along the West Coast, the smoke that fills the sky and clouds the vision. That's very much the Saturn-Neptune combination. There's many positive things we could point to with this combination. I think of it as the combination that has the most to do with the spiritual maturation process, where Neptune is related to spirituality, the sacred, the divine, the holy, and Saturn at its best has to do with wisdom, maturity, strength, humility, discipline, seriousness. And so if you combine Saturn with Neptune, which also has a lot to do with your general vision of life, your imagination, your flow of consciousness, and Saturn lends its maturity and wisdom. So there's a real potential for a more mature vision if you want to reflect on how these last 2-3 years you've had a ongoing spiritual maturation process, or ways in which you can see that your spiritual vision for yourself and for the world has matured. That's what's trying to happen. And I think we can see evidence of this in the world, in spite of all the challenges that go with it. It's certainly a heavy combination. It has a lot to do with the potential for difficult states of consciousness, fear and anxiety, the numbers of people around the world that are living with anxiety and fear at this point. Just today, the White House, Trump, has taken measures to repeal the Dreamer legislation. And the numbers of people that must now be feeling anxiety and fear about their future, and a sense of tragic awareness and grief. This is something of the Saturn-Neptune combination. It has something to do with fearful visions of the future, and sometimes a kind of dystopian energy. The sense that this past year we've been living in a kind of dystopian future, the dark future that we never thought would actually arrive in a way is here. And yet The Saturn-Neptune combination has everything to do with learning to have faith in the darkness, to find ways in which faith overcomes fear, to strengthen your faith in the face of life's challenges or through life's challenges. We can see the Saturn-Neptune in a number of other ways. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is clearly just a test. So this third card is supposed to represent the questioner. So this is supposed to represent me, but it's also supposed to represent you if you're watching this video. And this is the king of fire in this deck. It would be the king of wands in a traditional deck. The maturity card, by the way, is the ace of pentacles. In this deck, the ace of rainbows, sometimes ace of coins. But this card is supposed to represent the questioner. And so the aspects of the questioner that are most relevant to the question, the area that you're seeking guidance around. And so for me, when I see this, this King of Fire with the life force energy that's clearly just completely free in the horror center, and the sense of this being's power and comfort with himself, to me it resonates with these other cards. Certainly this King of Fire is supposed to represent a very mature kind of energy, and it connects with this previous card. You can see this kind of healing, and for me, I definitely feel like I've been in a maturation process the last couple years, and that there's been like a lot of healing that's happened, and a lot of that healing has happened because I've been able to just trust my process. And then this card is kind of what has been unfolding for me recently, feeling more and more of my own creative fire. And so you want to reflect on how you relate to this individual who has a kind of master of chi energy, creative potency. And so this question about maturity, to me, it's saying that in order to mature, allow and trust the natural healing process of the psyche, of the world. And as one is able to trust the healing process, one discovers more and more fire, life force that is freed, unblocked, and released to move up the chakra system and open the heart and open the potential for more creativity and expression. And so the fourth card is meant to represent the environment. I think it can also represent helpers and allies, but it can represent any aspect of the environment, people, places, and things in your life that are relevant to the question, in this case, about maturity and maturation. And so this card will give a sense for it'll give a sense for potentially what is a resource of support in your environment, but it could also indicate blockages or challenges in the environment to take note of and be aware of with regard to the question. And so this is an interesting one. I really like this card. It's been coming up a lot for me, the postponement card in the Osho deck. And there's a lot of different ways you can interpret this, and of course that's the whole key with the tarot, is it's about taking the card into your own imagination and finding your own associations, just like you would with a dream. You know, it's not about somebody else interpreting your dream for you, although sometimes that can be helpful. It's more about finding your own interpretations, your own connections, your own tapping into your own feelings about any particular image that you're working with. And so I'll share my own thoughts about this card, but ultimately it's like, well, how do you relate to the idea of postponement and this image of a person who's in black and white and gray, and the environment that this person is black and white, gray landscape, but the person is looking through a window into a colored universe of many vibrant possibilities. Now, this person also has colors on the garment, which indicates that there's a kind of connection between the current energy of this person and their connection to the potential future. And so postponement, I mean, you can think about it in lots of ways. It could be indicative of some area of your life where you're postponing something, where you're perhaps just delaying out of wisdom or out of maturity, waiting to do something, seeing in the future a certain potential, but waiting, having a sense of patience before moving into that potential. And so in the past, when I would get this card, I would sometimes see it as a commentary on my own kind of patterns of procrastination, and it would kind of take me into my feelings there. But lately, I've been trying to interpret this card as really my kind of fundamental principle of working with the tarot is to try to interpret each card in a loving, kind way, because ultimately this is just technology that's supposed to facilitate kind, loving messages from your higher self. And so I ultimately have to have a kind of commitment to myself when working with tarot cards that whatever comes, that I ultimately find a way of reading the cards in a kind, loving way. Now, sometimes you get kind, loving messages that are indicating that you should be careful in certain ways, or perhaps there might be a kind of friendly, constructive criticism that's coming that you can kind of take in and realize the value of and see the positive way in which that suggestion or what feels like a kind of constructive critique, you know, a positive way of pointing out something that maybe you could do a little better next time. But ultimately, it's like it's up to you to really feel the truth of that. If you're left with some kind of feeling of judgment from the cards, or you feel like somehow they're punitive or like really some kind of big warning or something that's scary, you definitely shouldn't leave a tarot spread feeling fear. You should feel reassured, you should feel comforted, you should feel love, because ultimately this is about unlocking your connection with your higher self, your loving higher self that's just like totally in love with you and sees you struggling here in the third dimension and wants to somehow get you some messages and some support and guidance. And so that's the biggest principle, is how do you interpret these cards in a way that's loving? And so with this card, postponement, now I kind of see it as validating my capacity to not take action immediately, to kind of slowly move in the direction of certain choices. It's a kind of core principle of holotropic breathwork, is not doing, waiting. Don't just jump to do something. Take your time, integrate, slow down. You can see where you're going, but take your time to get there. So the fact that this is in the position in the spread that has to do with the environment, I have to reflect on that, and you will as well. You can take these and just sit with them. You know, I could reflect on how there might be something in my environment that's actually making it harder to move through the window. That could be helpful, you know, to be able to think about that. Maybe there's something that is making it harder for me to act now. And I can certainly see ways in which that could be true for me right now. Um, it could also indicate that um, there are other people to consider in my environment in terms of the choices that I make, and that sometimes honoring other relationships, you need to postpone things. And I think that's kind of resonating for me right now. I can see where there's certain things that I might want to do faster, but out of love and consideration for others, there's a sense of kind of slowing down, which is always a kind of key thing for me because I tend to move too fast. So this card really helps me remember to slow down. Okay, so yeah, now kind of getting a feeling tone, you can see that, you know, the cards start to connect and you can feel a kind of overall gestalt and meaning starting to reveal itself. Um, Guidance about maturation. The background has been a healing process, and a kind of key to that healing process has been being able to trust that healing process, and that has unlocked a certain potential, this creative fire energy. The King of Fire is part of what maturation looks like. It looks like somebody very at home with their energy and its capacity to be creative. And then this fourth card is, as I'm reflecting on it, it seems to be saying that maturity often looks like postponing things. Like sometimes it's really immature to rush into something. So that's very helpful for me to think about right now. And now the fifth card, which is supposed to represent the answer, or the maybe a better way of putting it is it sums things up, a summing up of what we've already come to. You know, there's already a lot of meaning here, and usually by this point you're already really feeling the message. And yet this card will kind of reinforce it and sum it up and maybe add something. And so let's see. I think it's this one. So this is a special card. The We Are the World card in this deck, the Osho Zen Tarot deck. It's the 10 of rainbows. It would be the 10 of pentacles. So this is the second pentacle card to come up. We got the ace, which is the beginning of the rainbow suit or the pentacles suit, and the 10, which is the kind of completion of the cycle of that suit. And you can see the image is very evocative. Pentacles are about how to live on Earth, how to be in this Earth realm, the third dimension. And so it's suggesting that maturity is about connecting with the whole, feeling one with all of humanity and one with the Earth, Mother Gaia. And so this one reminds me to stay connected to others. And I was just shuffling and some cards popped out, so let's take a look. Success and rebirth. So those are like bonus cards. Sometimes they pop out. Sometimes you get to the fifth card in this spread, and if something's not clear, if the fifth card doesn't sum everything up in a way that's satisfying, and for me, there's a feeling that I'm looking for with each tarot spread. And it's a feeling of, yes, I've got the message. Thank you. A kind of relaxation, a kind of heart opening, a reconnection with my higher self, which of course is nourishing and validating, affirming, reconnecting with a sense of magic and mystery. That's what the tarot does for me. But sometimes you get to the fifth card and feels like you need a little more. Or you just want to keep the dialogue going. Because really this is about unlocking a certain capacity that is there all the time, to be in dialogue with your higher self all the time, or feel one with your higher self all the time. That's kind of the goal, one of them. And so sometimes you get to the end of the 5-card spread and you're like, oh, I wish I could keep talking to my higher self. And so you can draw another card or two, and usually that wraps things up. And so these two just happened to fall out. I didn't intend to do any more because it felt pretty complete, actually. But sometimes 2 cards or whatever will just reveal themselves. And so, I don't know, for me, these are, real positive cards. The 6 of Fire, 6 of Wands in other decks, clearly kind of connects with this card. There's a image of the whole earth and this kind of triumphant tiger. For me, the tiger is a real power animal, has come to me many times in my life, and so this is very affirming for me. It suggests that this kind of maturation healing process where I've been connecting with my creative fire and learning how to slow down and remember my connections with loved ones and with community and with Gaia, and to make time and space for those connections is really important, and that I'm in some kind of successful process there, and that's what it feels like. It does feel like I'm in a process of success, and success with coming home to myself, really. And then this rebirth card is kind of similar. It's, I don't know, could put it anywhere here. It's connected to the healing. It's connected to this fiery king here, and it suggests a rebirth into higher awareness and maturity. Ultimately, and this is these 3 camel, lion, child. If you read the commentary for this deck, it makes clear that this is coming from Nietzsche. Writes somewhere about this evolution from camel to lion to child, and the camel is kind of sleepy and dull. The lion is kind of roaring with pride and with self-awareness, and then the child is more like innocent and free and playful. And so this card is, to me, suggesting that maturity also looks like youthful, playful energy, and so it's reminding me to play. So those are some pretty cool cards, and we've got the astrology here as well. Could point to a lot of things. There's a real strong Jupiter energy in the sky right now, this amazing Jupiter-Uranus opposition, which has everything to do with rebirth and successful breakthroughs, happy breakthroughs. I mean, this ticker tape parade is very much a Jupiter-Uranus kind of energy, and it has the potential for rebirth. It is really the combination we see the most often in individual charts, transits, or collective alignments, when there is this real potential for collective and individual breakthroughs. It's what was in the sky, for example, when the Berlin Wall came down, or within that same alignment, a few months later, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. It has that kind of mutiny on the bounty, breaking out of Shawshank, liberation into happy, new, expansive possibilities. And this is part of the paradox of our time right now, is it's so intense, which is the plutonic dimension of our time. And yeah, that intensity is really dominating the shadow, the underworld, the sense of an eruption of collective shadow material that is extremely dangerous. That's something of the Pluto element here. And you can see Jupiter has been square Pluto. It's just been a very strong Jupiter Pluto square that's been just dominating ever since the election last year. It's now starting to separate. You can see they're about 6 degrees apart. So we're in the later stages of that Jupiter Pluto alignment. Let me put these cards in a little better. Let's put these down here. Let's put this trust card there. And let's say that these 3 cards are the answer. Okay, I think that's a good enough test.